This is Motovation. I'm Lori Joy Kingwell.
And I'm Krissy Vann. We're two dreamers on two wheels inspired by our community.
And celebrating the voices we're just lucky enough to discover along the ride. So if not already, like, subscribe, follow along, do what you gotta do to not miss an episode.
Do you remember when you first suited up to go for a ride the first time by yourself? You turned the key, deep breaths, put the bike in gear, and throttled forward. When out on the road solo, you probably felt pretty damn vulnerable. When going on a first group ride, you may have started to rapidly overthink. Are they watching how I ride? Do they know I'm new? Did I change lanes okay? Am I even fit to be a motorcyclist? Today's episode is called Start the Damn Bike, and we welcome guest Hayley Wight, who's subbing in for Lori, who's on a well-deserved travel adventure. Hayley joined us on the podcast previously to speak candidly on her journey into motherhood. Since then, she took a big vulnerable leap and started her social media pursuit by creating Mumz the Word. It's an honest and often hilarious look at motherhood. Have you ever considered starting a creative venture and placing it into the world? It's scary as fuck. So today we open up on the vulnerability of putting yourself out there, how to deal with your inner narrator who may solely run on imposter syndrome, and how to keep showing up for yourself so you can enjoy the ride. This is the Motovation. Reunited, and it feels so good.
Reunited, and it feels so good.
We should just make this the podcast.
I agree. Like, we could do a musical interlude or just make it a musical throughout.
You know, if anyone, like if a team could ever pull the musical podcast interlude thing off, it would be us.
I completely agree. Yeah.
Well, I'm super stoked to have you back because as we were chatting before we hopped on here, which for the record, I am in my toilet office again, friends. It's really getting a lot of use. If you don't understand the reference, I'm not going to bother to explain because it's funnier that way. But Hayley and I have really paralleled on shifting gears in regards to putting ourselves out there in a new way. And like for Lori and I, we've talked about this before with starting the Motovation, where we each had a separate freak out over having a podcast where if you've listened to our off-roads, we rarely leave anything off the record. And then for myself, I started a social media venture as a career, content creating for all things fitness and wellness. And then Hayley just starting Mumz the Word. And the thing I found most interesting is when Hayley was talking about kicking this off, I found myself giving her, I was probably about a couple months or a couple weeks at least into my transition at this point. And I kept giving her this advice being like, you got to do it. There's no voice better than yours. Like it may be a saturated niche, but you're the one that's not out there. And basically talking her up, and not because you're an amazing friend of mine, but because I truly believe you have something incredible to offer. And then I was like, funny how my inner narrator sounds like you're a piece of shit. You got nothing to give in the world. That's when you start to realize it's really backwards when we're trying to be creative.
Yeah. It's like it almost goes into like with any like therapy or reading or like even like social media people that I follow about, you know, self-love and things. It's like when they say, would you talk to somebody else the way you talk to yourself? And I'm like, man, the way I talk to me, I'm such a bitch. Like, I'm like, God, I would not be friends with me if I talked to you like that. And it's me talking to me. And I'm like, I wish sometimes that I could take like almost exactly what you've just said there, the way that I would talk to you when you were starting out and you were talking to me about your imposter syndrome. And that was like, no, like you're awesome at this. Like you were chosen for a reason and you have things to say and everything you say is relevant. Look how hard you're working. And yet we're so bad at doing that to ourselves. And it's like, think of the power we could unleash if we were so kind to ourselves.
Definitely. It's like the bully in the brain that we carry around. And, you know, for myself, when I've been going through this transition, I'm in such a good headspace now, but I had to actively work to get there. And I have to actively work to keep that. So I'm curious for yourself, because the difference for me is my niche that I'm speaking to is either here sharing people's stories, talking about bikes, etc., or all things fitness and wellness. It's a niche about living a fit and well life. Whereas for you, you're like, this is the real life that I'm living right now. So I know you conceptualized for a while. Talk me through actually putting it out there.
Yeah, like I had this thought in my mind a lot about finding a way to just put something out there that might have been helpful to me in the past when I was struggling and for my journey into this thing we call motherhood.
Which I'll pause you there if you want to hear more about your journey, which you absolutely should. If either you're a friend of a mom, because it can help us understand and show up better as friends, but also if you are a new mom or a mom that maybe did not feel seen, make sure that you check out that episode. We will link it below this, but continue.
So I wanted to just start putting some stuff out there, and I started to see a little more of social media, like, the other side of Instagram where, the moms have messy hair and are covered in puke and are saying the things that people don't often say. But it was still small. Like, it was still, a lot of the stuff we see on Instagram is very curated. It's this comparison game that we're always playing that makes us feel like shit. And I was like, I feel like I keep talking about it and I should just start doing it, because even if like I understand social media, nobody's going to be following me. People might not be seeing me. It's whatever. But even if it's a little bit of like a release, even for me, just to be like, hey, here's something that you might not have known about me, or here's something that I was going through, like just a little window. And if that just helps one person, then great, and I was really trying to piggyback off of this feeling that I was getting by just talking to people. Like, I had some very great conversations with new moms that I met, and even like seasoned veteran moms that I was talking to, or even just friends, like going through different stages, that people have actively reached out to me and asked me for advice, and I've given it to them, or just even given my thoughts on it. And they've genuinely said thank you. And the way that that made me feel, I was like, this is what I'm fucking supposed to do. Like, this feeling counts for something and I need to chase that. But to mirror that, I'm also crippled by self-doubt and self-confidence all the time. So the idea of breaking that down and just filming myself, and even just like looking at videos of my face, I was like, oh God, like I can't, like, and even so, I was like, eventually I was like, fuck it, just do it. And I did. And I just did. One morning I made a reel. I'd never made a reel before. I like half-assed it. Like, I figured, like, I didn't even do it the way that I now know you can do it. That's so much easier. And I put it out there, and I was like in my underwear with like no makeup on, eating chips. And it was ridiculous. And I did it. And I think you were the first person I texted. And I was like, oh my God, I just did something. And you were like, yeah, that reel is still getting so much traction that I can't believe it. And I'm like, this is the one that somehow gained momentum. And then I was like, okay, like, it's funny. I'll try and get some followers. I'll try and get out there. But then I just sort of like leaned into the having fun with it, like making some things, finding some audio that I found fun, like that kind of thing, and put up some reels. And it's been fun. It's been nice to tap into that creative side of me, like, again, like to find that like spark, coming up with ideas, planning things out. And I've been doing that for a couple of weeks, and I've kind of been off for about a week now because of personal life things have taken precedent. But now I'm starting to really think more about why I started to do it. Like, I've got like that side of me that likes to be funny and play on things, but now I'm really finding myself questioning. I'm not actually saying anything of meaning at the moment. Like, I'm not I don't feel like I'm actually saying anything helpful or that highlights the things that I want to be highlighted about the struggle that's currently going on for moms and this idea of motherhood in the world. So I've been sort of grappling with that the last few days, because I think the only way for me to do that is to be even more raw and even raw.
It's raw, as Gavin and I would say.
Like,
it's how I order my steak.
Yeah,
Want it raw.
Raw. I'm so posh. But yeah, like that involves me tapping into an even more vulnerable side of me and saying things that people might find controversial. And I've put myself on pause. Like, I haven't done it. Like, I've written out things to say, I've put things in it, and I haven't done it. And it's terrifying to me. So I'm currently trying to fight through that. You know, I feel like I'm going up to one of those gates at like the subway and putting my ticket in and just going into it. I'm like, I know I need to do it. And again, I don't have any followers. So like the chance of anybody seeing it is slim to none at this point, but also somebody could see it. And I'm so crippled by this fear of being vulnerable and saying something wrong. But I'm also like, who decides what's wrong? Like, I'm not going to start spitting facts and saying like, this is a proven scientific like thing. That's not what I'm trying to do at all. But I want to share my opinions the same way I do with people and genuinely start to help people. And that is terrifying to me.
Well, and it makes a lot of sense because it's deep creativity, obviously showing the other side of you, because you are a hilarious person, but exactly that, you have some really meaningful, real things to share that, there are other individuals. If you had been sitting on the other side, especially when you were first entering the journey into motherhood or like early pregnancy, these are messages I'm sure that would have been really helpful for you to hear. And I'm sure in some capacity are still very relevant in your life now. And so it's such a big piece of you that you're putting out there. It doesn't matter whether it goes there with viewers. It's literally putting a piece of yourself that's out for the public to see. And I think that's why I really wanted to do this episode with you, because I think any piece of creative work like that is so personal. It's why I love to go through art shows. You go to any art show, you walk in some rooms and you're like, whoa, that's pretty dark. Whoa, that's fucking weird. Whoa, that's fucking cool. And I love it all, even if it's not directly my taste, because what I see in all of those spaces is you have had the bravery to take something that was sitting in your brain and put it out into the world. And what might not mean something for me or what I might not like is something that completely resonates and hits another soul out there. And the thing that you highlighted as you were first speaking there was that you are so connected to your why. And I think that is why there is no wrong that you can do as you go forward. But it's really good to talk about this fear factor because we all feel it. Like for myself, I've been in a career path where my entire life, I've in some capacity put a version of myself out there. It's been broadcasting or like obviously in the social media sphere as well. And the closer you get to that inner self, like for me, I had a decade of TV experience, but when I made the switch, it was terrifying. And same thing, no viewers. I wasn't afraid about the fact that there would be no viewers. I was like, people are going to see me. People are going to see me. And it might be one person. That one person's going to see me. You probably feel more naked right now than you did holding that bag of potato chips.
Veggie straws.
Veggie straws were open for sponsorship.
Yes.
Her reel is crushing it.
Yeah. Oh, I should have tagged them so long.
I do think one thing that you are doing very smart about this, though, is knowing that you need to take pause to give yourself mental space to feel good about when you are ready to put that out there. Because one reality of social media is that there are people that either A, are trolls, or B, if it is a topic that's controversial, even when it's not, trust me, I've had rants over my knobbly knees that look like babies when I straighten up. People can be really mean when there's anonymity, right? And so it's so important to take care of your own mental wellness. I think it's a reason why you see creators down the line that have been really big on YouTube or TikTok sensations that have taken off very quickly. Sometimes they have to go offline for like a long period of time because mental health can deteriorate if you start to attach like, oh, they said this about me. That must be a reflection of who I am. Like there is a danger there if you aren't super clear.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I know that with like social media can be used for such great things, but it can also be used as a tool to destroy. And you see that a lot with certain influencers. Yeah, I think there's actually something happening right now with an influencer all about mascara, and she's been bullied to a point that she's taken down her page. She's not posting. She's gone into hiding. And it's all through this idea and this creation of trust that influencers are supposed to be having. And like when they're pushing brands or they're recommending products. And it's like, well, hold the phone here, people. Like, this is social media. This is Instagram. It's a lot more curated. And we've been fudging advertising since the dawn of time. So yeah, she might have had like whatever it is, like if she maybe had double pump mascara or eyelashes on. I'm sorry, but you think half of these celebrities that are selling Head and Shoulders use Head and Shoulders? Like, no,
totally.
like
Jennifer Aniston and Aveeno come to mind.
Yeah, like Eva Longoria and like using like boxed hair dye. Like, I'm like, it's not a thing. And it's no excuse, even if somebody makes a mistake, for you to then ruin their lives. Somebody can be so high and then you can just cut them down. It's so unfair. And I think almost like weirdly enough, like I've thought so much about it too, like about like the idea that people might not like what I have to say, and people will come at me, especially members of the patriarchy are not going to like what I have to say. And even other mothers probably won't like what I have to say. As a recovering people pleaser, I strangely enough have this weird I don't give a fuck attitude about it. Because honestly, I'm kind of dying for men to come at me about my content in this way, because it almost speaks exactly to the reason why I'm doing it. But again, I haven't lived through that yet. So, maybe in 2 years, if this takes off, we'll have this conversation and I'll be crying into a pillow. But
as a manifester, I will say in 2 years when this takes off.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. But that's the thing. And it's like, I still just keep coming back to this idea. We're starting to see more women speak up, but we still need so much more of it. And there's like this week, I feel like, hopefully this doesn't sound crass but there is a lot of talk this week on social media and in the news about postpartum anxiety and mood disorders. And because there's a very horrible tragedy happened in Boston with a mom and her children. And it's all around postpartum mental disorders. And this stuff just isn't talked about properly in the way that it should be. And the credit that moms deserve around, just the honest storytelling of what motherhood means, not mothering, not caregiving, none of this idea of motherhood in society today. It's so fucked up, and we just need to start talking about it more, because the people that are suffering are moms, and moms are such an integral part of society. You literally can't have new members of society without them. Like, society crumbles without moms, without people staying at home to raise children. You can't have it. Men can't go to work if their wives aren't at home taking care of their kids. There's all of these things, and we're failing them. And it's because we're not spreading awareness of the things that matter, and I'm like, I gotta help. Like, I can't sit here any longer and just be like, yeah, moms need help, and then not do anything about it. I feel like, and that really sort of helped me this week with this like thought process that I've been having, is that, I want to keep making stuff that's fun and funny and speaking to that side of myself, because motherhood is hilarious sometimes. It's an absolute joke. Like, I think the fact my eye is swollen is because there's probably human shit in it. Like, that, I'm like, that's a very real circumstance of my life. Like, and that's funny. But
I'm recording in the bathroom, so I might be equally acceptable.
Wash your hands. I can't stress this enough. But like, what's not funny is, postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, the fact that moms today, like pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, the numbers in maternal, perinatal, mental disorders has tripled. Like, all of these things, it's a problem, and we need to start talking about it, because we can't keep going the way that we're going and expecting this idea of motherhood and motherhood's functioning in the way that they have been functioning to keep going, because eventually something's going to break, and it will break in a very bad way.
Well, and I think for yourself, even just hearing you speak to it now, maybe this is the start your bike moment, because I do think you have so much to offer on this front from personal experience. I know you're also very well researched, and you've also have lived experience of going through this. And simultaneously to yourself, I still have a very good friend that was on a similar pregnancy timeline as you, that literally had such bad postpartum, and same thing, felt so alone in that. And I especially love that we have this conversation, because as people know, I'm child-free by choice. And that's another polarized element in the social media spheres, where these two sides have been pinned against each other. And so I'm glad that you highlight how important mums are in society. Just because I don't choose to be one myself, my wish for myself is to be like, we are the village, because there are moms that exactly that, like, you are expected to carry so much on your shoulders. And so, like, even as friends of moms, we should do our very best to understand what this journey looks like, because they're going to be part of the future, whether I have had my own offspring or not. Your child is part of my future.
Yeah.
There's no other way to slice that. And so I find it very backwards, especially when I do see, because it's not just the patriarchy and dads that get on cases like yourself in elements like this. There are people from the child-free community that come at people that are outspoken about motherhood and say, well, you just shouldn't have had kids. What have you? What the fuck is that? Aren't we supposed to all be a community together of women? Like, we are celebrating something incredible that women can do. We're expecting them to do it all in themselves, and then we're going to shit on them because they're having a hard time. Like, no, listen the fuck up. These are our sisters. These are our friends. These are like, that's the part that I really hope remedies with people like yourself and raising their voices to things like that, because it's quite backwards. And I do think that it's the climate of society right now. We hear something we don't agree with, don't like, it's not how we live our lives. And so we automatically decide to shit on it. And this is what makes it so much harder with people offering themselves, because what you are planning to do, Hayley, is an offering to society. Even if you're starting as a small community, creativity is an offering to society, and there is this beautiful vulnerability to it. But what we need to do as consumers is listen. Listen.
And that's the thing. It's this idea, like, I wish we could just get past this idea that because somebody's opinions and choices are different than yours, like, doesn't mean that that person is telling you that your choices are wrong. Like, that's not it at all. Like, me, and even saying, like, as a mom, that being a mom is hard, like, doesn't mean that I regret the choices and the situation that I've been in. And that's like something that drives me crazy about motherhood, because it's like, who else do we say that to? Like, I can't think of anybody. And I think about this a lot. Like, when we were having our conversations around you changing your career and you saying, I'm finding it hard, like, this is a difficult transition for me, I'm questioning everything, I'm putting like a lot of hours in I don't know if this is the right decision. And if I turned around and said to you, well, you chose this, what?
Yeah.
You would have been like, what an asshole. Like, or if somebody's running a marathon and they pull over and they've got a stitch and they're like, God, that was really hard. Like, that was just so like physically and mentally draining. And if you said, well, you chose this, so suck it up, princess. Like, it's so, when you put it into on a different lens, it's so demeaning and so wrong. And it just voids all the feelings of something being hard because you made this choice. And it's like, why can motherhood not be hard? And no point is anyone saying, like, in a lot of these conversations that I see, I wish I hadn't had my child. They're saying this motherhood, the expectations put on mothers, all of the things, is hard. And that should be okay. I talk a lot about motherhood being hard because it is really hard. But mothering my son is not hard. Loving my son is not hard. And I hate that I have to make that clear when I say those things. It's like, no, listen to why it's hard and just have some empathy, have some compassion, just be open to hearing another perspective, especially if it's a perspective that you don't have. Surely, then we can all just get to a better place.
1000%. We have further understanding of each other. And I think what you're saying really highlights why it's important to share our vulnerabilities and perspectives, because as I say, you putting yourself out there in this fashion is something that will resonate with people. And it's the same reason why we started this podcast, where we're still small but mighty. We've been consistent for almost 2 years now. And our philosophy has always been, if there's just one voice, and we just had a guest recently, Lizzie, who lives on Vancouver Island. It was wonderful to have her. She was extremely nervous to come on the pod because she's like, I've not really done anything like this. And again, very vulnerable conversation. But she reached out because she had been this listener since the beginning. And she's like, I've gotten so much from it. I've gotten so much from your guests. And so it's about leaving that like that mark on the human. But the only way that's going to happen is if you just start and if you just do. And so that is why we kind of came on here today to encourage you to have empathy and compassion towards people that are putting themselves out there, because I know sometimes it's like, like when you look at imposter syndrome, what's everyone going to think? Like, oh, you just want to be on Instagram now or TikTok or YouTube, etc. Totally. And you're like, no, you feel like you have something to contribute, and you do have something valuable to contribute. All humans do. Literally, one of the biggest things we have is connection and conversation. And these are now platforms that allow us to do that. So I'm curious, as we start to round out this conversation, knowing the fear that you're feeling now, what steps do you think have to happen in between before you're able? I mean, you've started the bike. So like, when are we going to kick it into that next gear? What does that look like?
I think I got to like practice maybe my like roll and stops. Remember when you're learning to ride your bike and you just like play with the clutch a little, like small steps. It
totally.
Okay. I got it. I think like the next step for me is honestly just to do it. Like I just gotta decide what I want to say and like say it.
Well, and you know what happens the minute you start riding and just going, every single trip you have out, you just become a better rider. You learn something new. And so that's the beauty of it. I know we started off with a musical, and if you've listened to our podcast before, you know that it might be time for, feel free to chime in, motivation, maintenance, motivation.
Maintenance.
Yeah, there we go.
I love a good jingle.
Right. You know, it changes every time. And I'm sure there's some people that are like, and this is when I turn the volume down. But with that said, I'm going to kick off our motivation maintenance here with a little nugget of wisdom that I've learned along this ride, is that if there is something that you really, truly believe in and are connected with your why, you need to do your best to quiet those inner and external voices and just begin. But then you also need to be mentally prepared to just keep going. So let's say you go out and have a nerve-wracking ride, you come back. Are you going to just like park your bike and never ride it again? Absolutely not. If you come back and there aren't people that are like, oh my God, you're amazing, you did a wheelie, like maybe all of a sudden you accidentally pop a wheelie that first trip out. But then the next few, you aren't able to do it again. And so you don't have that feedback. You need to be so connected to your why and your belief system that you're going to just keep going, because that is a reality when there's creative work. You're not going to, there are those subset of people where it's instantaneous success or instantaneous massive feedback. But the reality is for the majority of people, it's about consistency and just keep going, just keep going, just keep riding. And so that is my maintenance for you. Even when you aren't getting the gratification of that feedback, be so connected to your why that you dedicate yourself to just keep going, because that is where the magic happens.
Just keep swimming. Just keep
exactly.
Swimming. Yeah. It's the instant gratification is a problem that we run into a lot in our society. We know, like we expect that. And I think as well, like one of the things that I learned a long time ago, like in film school with writing, things like that, is don't be so married to your first idea. Like let it evolve. Like, and that's where like I've been on this journey as well. It's like I started somewhere and now where I'm going is quite different, but feels organic and feels better. And I think that is just a part of the process, and you have to allow for that growth, follow that, and just trust the process there.
I really appreciate that one, because it is so true, where we maybe put something out that's not working and then we're like, oh, there must be something wrong with me. I quit.
Totally.
But really, like, it's more like a little dose of Friends where you're like, pivot, like just be willing. Like eventually the couch is probably going to make it upstairs. Maybe you don't even want the couch and you actually want a futon. Like it's perfectly okay, but it is very easy to mentally become stuck. It's almost like we decide like, this is the identity I created for this. Yeah. And then you're like, oh, wait, I'm the mastermind brain behind this. I can change this also.
Yeah. You're like, no, you don't silo yourself. Like,
right.
Break down the walls.
Do you have a quote for us today?
So mine is, of course it is. It's a Dr. Seuss quote, because
I love Dr. Seuss.
Right? And so mine is, you have the brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself in any direction you choose.
Oh, I love it. I remember when Dr. Seuss died, which sounds morbid, but I was obsessed with the library as a kid, mainly because like stories were just my escape. I feel like I traveled the world. I went to magical places. I loved reading as a kid. Like I can't even explain. And anyways, I do remember when there was a sign in the library and I like mourned, but I was like a young child that had no concept of what it meant, but I thought all his books would be gone.
Oh,
I know.
So you were devastated,
right? I was like, I had no logical connection over what was transpiring there, but this is it's come full circle because Dr. Seuss lives on.
He sure does.
So mine is from the opposite of the whimsical lands of Dr. Seuss to something super literal. It's a definition from the dictionary. Tenacity, noun, the quality of being very determined, persistent forward momentum with a game plan, to never stop trying to achieve a goal, even in the face of seemingly unsurmountable odds. And that, my friends, is the Motovation.
You've just listened to the Motovation Podcast with your host, Krissy Vann, and me, Lori Joy Kingwell.
Thanks for joining us along the ride. We've got new episodes dropping every Monday, and we're all about community. So follow us on Instagram at Motovation Podcast and visit our website at themotovation.com.
And in the meantime, tanks full and full throttle.